Nina.
Hello.
Just going to close the door so we have a little privacy. So, okay. Well, as you reflect back on your lesson, how do you think it went?
I think the lesson went well. I think the book choice was a good choice because she was able to make the connection of, you know, activating her prior knowledge, because she was in an experience very similar as the one described in the book.
Okay, so when I look at your objective, you wrote share personal feelings and make a connection to the information from the book.
Mm-hmm.
So according to your objective, did she meet the criteria?
Mm-hmm. She was able to share her personal feelings. She actually wrote, for the activity, she had to discuss information about her move in like a diary form, kind of reader response. So she was able to successfully do that.
Yeah, I see that, and I also see that there was a discussion. And while I was watching your tape, I noticed there was good body language going on. So you guys were talking back and forth. She was open, engaging, and there was a nice rhythm of conversation that was going on.
Right, and she seemed to enjoy it too, like I said, because she was able to make the connection. So she kind of wasn't stuck when we were having a discussion. She seemed to be okay with it. She wasn't kind of caught off guard.
Okay, so one of the things I was wondering about was, how did you measure the criteria? How did you measure the assessment? I know that here you have an assessment discussion and diary entry. How did you measure her success?
That was one of the things that I had difficulty with, was measuring, only because I didn't know, it wasn't a writing assignment where I would have had a rubric for. It wasn't a formal writing. It was more of, you know, like a diary reflection kind of thing. So that was one of the things that I was going to ask you in regard to what could I have used, because for assessment I had, you know, discussion and based on her writing, but I didn't know how to actually measure, like how to measure somebody's, like a reader response in the form of when it was a personal experience. Like I didn't feel comfortable doing that.
Okay, so tell me why you didn't want to use a rubric.
Well, when I think of rubric, when I think of writing, I think of more like a formal writing. You know, where you have a rough draft and then you turn into the final copy with your revising and editing, where this wasn't that type of writing assignment. So I didn't know exactly how I could maybe create a rubric where it would be based on more of a personal response reflection.
Okay, and earlier, and I noticed you used this word with me, and you also used it with her, and as a result of using the word informal, she became very relaxed. So I picked up on that in the observation. So I'm hearing that you don't want to use a rubric that is more formal, that this was more informal.
Yeah,
so,
I'm not opposed to using rubric. I just didn't know how to kind of set it up. Do you know what I mean? So it would be able to measure her personal response, I guess.
Okay, so let's try to figure that out. So I'm going back to the objective, and I'm seeing that you started out with sharing personal feelings and make a connection to the information from the text. So, what do you mean by connection to the information?
Because the book was the Great Migration, so it was talked about people moving from down south, moving up north for jobs, for a better life, and in her situation, she was also in the book that people had to leave, you know, a lot of their stuff behind and kind of move away, and not all their family members were able to go. Where in her situation, she moved, you know, she had to leave her best friend, but it wasn't that she had to leave her family, because she went with her mom and her grandma, and her experience of moving was different than their experience of moving. Their experience for moving was, you know, more to better themselves, where her moving was just a location change, I guess you could say.
So in your description you talk about the experience in the book versus her experience, and you're wondering about how to basically come up with some kind of evaluation assessment.
Right.
So I'm hearing those two separate notations. So rubrics don't always have to be very formal. They don't have to be quantitative. They can often be qualitative. So I'm just wondering what kind of qualitative notations that you can include.
Right. And that's where I'm kind of stuck too, because I mean, it wouldn't be necessarily, I mean, you know, when I do my own teaching, you know, whenever anything's graded, I always show the kids the rubric, this is how you're going to be graded, this is how, but I don't want to necessarily have her think that it's more of a formal, which, I mean, I guess I could probably explain that to her prior to starting, like, this is a rubric just to kind of follow so that you're on the right path of, you know, making sure everything's included.
Mm-hmm. So I hear the word included as well. So what kind of things would you include
In
your assessment evaluation?
That's what I don't know. I don't know what should be included. What should be included from a person's personal experiences. That's where I'm kind of like stuck. I don't know what should be there.
Well, before you were talking about comparing, and you gave me the example of in the book, the family loses a friend, and in her own experience, she didn't leave her family or leave family behind, but she left a friend behind. So I see a commonality between those two pieces.
Okay. So, like, I don't know, should that be a rubric score?
Well, remember, it doesn't have to be a rubric. It can be simply, what other kind of ways do you evaluate assessment?
Through discussion, I read her story to make sure that she was able to make the connection from herself to the book, where she compared items in the book. But as far as like a score, like a 3, she had this, 2, she had this, 1, she had this. You know, that kind of measurement. I don't know what should be, what is considered a 3, what is considered a 2, because it's her own personal. So I can't say, oh, she got a 3 because she experienced losing a friend. A 2 would be if she didn't, because that's where I don't really
Okay,
know.
so then you're wondering about the numbers. What would happen if you took the numbers out?
But then how would you measure it then? How would that be measurable assessment?
So if you're asking for her to look at the book, and then you're asking her to write to include a writing piece.
But the writing piece is more of like a personal reflection
On
her experience
of
moving.
And so there was a reading piece, and now you're asking for a writing piece. So if it was on moving, and you're looking at the reading piece and the writing piece, and you're not necessarily wanting to come up with numbers, but you do feel the need to check something, what can you do to kind of bridge that gap? And you did give me the one example of connections to family. We can say other people, because here it wasn't family, but it was a friend. So, like, do you see anything else that maybe you could include in order to make an accurate assessment?
I guess to see if she includes in her writing the connection of her, I guess maybe her feelings to moving, and the connection to the people's feelings moving in the book.
Oh, good. I like that. So that's really meaningful, because you're making a point-by-point comparison. The book, her writing. Was there anything else?
Well, I think that was my main focus was the personal feelings. So
you could call those like the micro concepts. I mean macro concepts.
and then just show that to her, and just say that these need to be included. The connections you're making to people in both, connections she's making, connections the other person's making for that.
So by doing that, you're kind of evaluating her ability to look within the text and draw from that, you know, what she read and then how it compares to her life. So it's a comparison piece. So if you're looking at a comparison piece, you can kind of use this visual here of the common concepts and what you're looking for.
Okay.
And you don't necessarily have to make them numerical. You know, you could say, yes, you did it here, yes, you did it there. And base it on that.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay, good. Alright, was there anything else that you wanted to kind of look at?
No, I think that was the main thing. I just kind of didn't know how to measure, you know, someone's personal feelings, but in a non-formal way, I guess you could say. That was the main.
So by connecting it to the reading and then doing a comparison, you can look, and then you're looking at both concepts,
Right.
and what she's drawing from the reading. As
Right.
well.
Okay.
So, like, do you think that you're going to do another writing piece sometime in the future? Or?
Yeah, we do the writing every day. Today's lesson, we didn't finish the writing from yesterday, was where she had to put herself, we were talking about, our book was about endangered animals, and she had to put herself in the position of being an endangered animals and kind of the feelings that went along with that, why were they endangered, that kind of thing.
So, like, based on what we went with today, and let's just say you didn't want to apply a formal rubric to it, is there anything that you would pull from this lesson, now that you've kind of thought about all the ideas, that you could apply to either...
Well, the rubric doesn't necessarily have to be a formal rubric, I guess you could say. You know, it could be more or less an informal, but measured, something's being measured to make it a rubric.
Yeah, you could, like, measurable units. Did they, did your student mention that?
Right, did they mention, well, whatever they're doing, but today it had to be, like, the habitat had to be mentioned. Reasons for extinction, was it because, or, well, if they were extinct, was it because roads were being put in, is it because houses were being built, what was the reason? So I could put that in as far as information for the rubric.
Okay.
So.
Alright, well, nice.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you, it was very
Good job.
helpful.
You bet.